I watched her all night. Not just because she was beautiful, though, Christ, she was. The way that dress clung to her hips, the way she sipped her wine like she wished it were something stronger. No, I watched because of the way my father's hand gripped her waist too tightly, the way she flinched just slightly when he laughed too loud. She caught me staring. "You're Richard's son," not a question, an accusation, "and you're his—" "What? Fourth wife?" Her lips twitched. "Fifth, actually." I shouldn't have stepped closer. I shouldn't have let my fingers brush hers as I took her empty glass. But revenge makes you reckless. "How long until he trades you in, Claire?" Her breath hitched. And just like that the game began. Midnight. The party hummed behind us, but out here the air was thick with something else. She stood at the balcony, railing, backlit by moonlight, the valley stretching endlessly below. The champagne had long since been replaced by something harder, bourbon, neat, just like I preferred it. Just like she was learning to. "You hate him, don't you?" A pause. Then, "I hate what he's turned me into." I was behind her now, close enough to smell her perfume, something dark and floral, like roses left to rot. My hands settled on the railing on either side of her, caging her in. "Then let me remind you who you really are," she shuddered. And when she turned, her lips were already parted. But I didn't kiss her, not yet. That would be too easy, too expected. Instead, I traced the line of her jaw with my thumb, feeling her pulse race beneath my touch. "Tell me something true, Claire." Her eyes searched mine in the darkness. "What do you want to know? Why you married him?" The question hung between us like a loaded gun. Below us, the city lights twinkled like fallen stars, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed a sound that felt prophetic. "Money," she whispered, but there was something else in her voice. Something broken. "Liar." Her laugh was bitter. "You think you know me? I know you're not what you pretend to be." I stepped closer, my chest nearly touching hers. "I know you read poetry when you think no one's watching. I know you cry in the shower because the acoustics muffle the sound. I know you're planning something." Her mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something raw and desperate beneath. "You don't know anything. Try me." The study was my father's. Sanctuary leather-bound books, cigar smoke, the ghost of his ego everywhere. That's why I pushed her against the desk. "This is a mistake. Then why are you pulling me closer?" Her moan was my answer. The way her nails dug into my shoulders, the way she gasped when I yanked her dress down, none of it felt like revenge anymore. It felt like need. A vase shattered as Claire's hand knocked it off the desk, the sound muffled by our tangled breaths. But even as we lost ourselves in each other, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly what she'd wanted. That somehow I was the one being played. The thought should have stopped me, should have made me pull back, reassess, think with my head instead of my. But then she whispered my name like a prayer, and all rational thought fled. Afterward, we lay tangled on the Persian rug, her head on my chest, my fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. The room smelled like sex and expensive cologne and the faint metallic scent of blood from where she'd bitten my lip. "Heal." "No," she said quietly. "Good." She lifted her head to look at me, her hair falling like a curtain around her face. "You really do hate him. He destroyed my mother." The words came out harsher than I intended. Drove her to pills, to alcohol, to the edge of that cliff on Highway 1. Claire's eyes widened. She didn't suicide? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. The official report said accident, but I know better. I know what he did to her. The affairs, the humiliation, the way he made her feel like she was nothing. I'm sorry. Are you? Or are you just another weapon in his arsenal? The question hung between us like a challenge. Claire sat up, not bothering to cover herself, and for a moment I thought she might hit me. Instead, she leaned down and kissed me, soft and sweet and tasting of regret. Some weapons, she whispered against my lips, cut both ways. We barely made it outside. The hedges were high, the night air cool, but nothing could douse the heat between us. This time felt different, urgent, almost desperate, like we were running out of time. We can't heal. Let him hear. Her leg hooked around my waist, and when I finally slid inside her, her cry was swallowed by the rustling leaves. But as we moved together under the stars, I caught a glimpse of something in her eyes, a calculation, a distance that hadn't been there before. Even in the midst of passion, she was thinking, planning, always 3 steps ahead. What are you plotting, Claire? She stilled beneath me, her breathing ragged. What makes you think I'm plotting anything? Because you're too smart to be here for love, too proud to be here just for money. So what is it? For a moment, I thought she might tell me. Her lips parted, and I saw something vulnerable flicker across her features. But then the mask slipped back into place, and she pulled me down for another kiss. Maybe I'm just here for the thrill, she murmured against my mouth, but we both knew that was a lie. Dawn came too soon. My father's voice boomed through the halls as guests departed. Claire straightened her dress with trembling hands, and I watched her transform back into the perfect stepmother, the dutiful wife, the woman who existed solely as his accessory. This can't happen again. Liar. And, as I walked away, I realized I hadn't just wanted to ruin him. I'd wanted her. But it was too late to understand what that meant. 3 weeks later, the divorce papers hit the tabloids. My father's rage made headlines, and Claire? She showed up at my door with a suitcase and a smirk. You started this, she said. I kissed her hard. No, we're just getting started. But as I led her inside, she caught my wrist. There's something you need to know. What? Your father didn't just destroy your mother, he destroyed mine too. The words hit me like a physical blow. What are you talking about? My mother was his second wife, before the one who died in that car accident, before the pharmaceutical heiress, before the senator's daughter, before me. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. He married her when I was 15, used her, degraded her, threw her away like garbage when he got bored. Claire, she killed herself 2 years later. Pills, just like your mother, but she left me something, a letter. Evidence, proof of what he really is. I stared at her, pieces falling into place. You've been planning this from the beginning. I've been planning this for 7 years. She stepped closer, her eyes fierce. I married him to get close to him, to learn his secrets, to destroy him from the inside out. And me? You were ... unexpected. She touched my cheek, and for the first time since I'd known her, She looked uncertain. You were supposed to be collateral damage, but then I fell in love with you. The words hung between us like a confession and a curse. I wanted to believe her. God help me. I wanted to believe that something real had grown between us in all the lies and manipulation. Show me, I said quietly. What? The evidence. Show me what you have on him. Her hotel room was a shrine to revenge. Photos, documents, financial records, 7 years of meticulous planning spread across every surface, bank statements showing offshore accounts, medical records from both our mothers. Private investigator reports documenting affairs, threats, suspicious deaths. Jesus Christ, Claire, this is just the beginning. She pulled out a laptop, fingers flying over the keys. I've been documenting everything. Every meeting, every phone call, every dirty deal. He's been laundering money through his charity foundation, bribing politicians. There's a paper trail that leads all the way to stop. I grabbed her hands, stilling them. Do you understand what you're talking about? These aren't just civil matters. This is criminal. If even half of this is true, it's all true. Her voice was deadly. Quiet. I've spent 7 years of my life gathering this evidence. 7 years of letting him touch me, control me, own me. All for this moment. And what happens after? When he's in prison or dead or whatever endgame you're planning. She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. Then our mothers can finally rest. I stared at the evidence spread before us, a lifetime of sins laid bare. My father wasn't just a cruel husband or a negligent father. He was a monster, and somehow this broken woman had been brave enough to walk into his lair and document every horror. What do you need from me? I need you to testify about what you witnessed, about what he did to your mother and us? I don't know. She turned away from me, wrapping her arms around herself. I've been so focused on destroying him that I never thought about what comes after. I never thought about ... double quotes. About what? About wanting to live. The next morning, I called my father. I need to see you. Of course you do. His voice was smug, satisfied. I assume you've heard about the divorce. That whore tried to take half of everything, but my lawyers, I'm coming over. Good. We need to discuss your behavior at the party. Several guests mentioned seeing you with Claire, and I won't tolerate. I hung up. The drive to his estate felt like a funeral procession. Claire sat beside me, silent, clutching a manila envelope that contained enough evidence to destroy him. We'd agreed on the plan: confront him together, give him a chance to come clean, then turn everything over to the authorities. But as we pulled through the gates, I had a sinking feeling that nothing would go according to plan. He was waiting for us in the library, dressed in his favorite burgundy robe, a crystal tumbler of brandy in his hand despite the early hour. When he saw Claire, his face twisted with rage. You have some nerve coming here? Hello, Richard. Claire's voice was perfectly composed. I should have you arrested for trespassing? You should have a lot of things, I said, stepping forward, but let's start with the truth. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Truth? From you? You're sleeping with my wife, ex-wife, and you want to lecture me about truth? I want to know about my mother. Something flickered across his face, fear, maybe, or calculation. What about her? I know she didn't kill herself because of depression. I know you drove her to it. Your mother was unstable, always was. I tried to help her, but you tried to control her. Just like you controlled Claire's mother. Just like you've controlled every woman who's ever been stupid enough to trust you. The glass in his hand shattered. Blood dripped from his palm, but he didn't seem to notice. You don't know what you're talking about? Then explain this. Claire stepped forward, pulling photographs from the envelope. These are from the private investigator you hired to follow my mother. The one who documented her every move in the weeks before she died. The one who reported back to you about her mental state, her medication, her vulnerabilities. His face went white. Or this. Another photograph. You at the pharmacy, filling a prescription that wasn't yours. The same medication they found in her system. That's, or this. A final photograph, and even I gasped. It showed my father and another man, someone. I didn't recognize exchanging an envelope outside what looked like a medical facility. Your contact at the coroner's office. The one who made sure both investigations were closed quickly and quietly. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, my father set down his broken glass and walked to the window, staring out at the garden where Claire and I had made love under the stars. You have no idea what you're dealing with, then tell us. He turned back to us, and for the first time in my life I saw him look old, tired, almost human. I never meant for it to go this far. Your mother was going to leave me. The words came out flat, matter of fact, like he was discussing the weather. She'd found out about the affairs, about the money. She was going to take half of everything and destroy me in the process. He poured himself another brandy with shaking hands. I couldn't let that happen. So you had her killed. I had her managed. He took a sip, grimaced. The pills were just supposed to make her more compliant, easier to control. But she was stronger than I thought. She kept fighting, kept asking questions. And Claire's mother? She was asking questions too. About the foundation, about where the money really came from. I thought if I married her, I could keep her quiet. But she was just like your mother, stubborn, righteous, impossible to control. Claire's hands were shaking now, but her voice remained steady. So you killed her too. I gave her a choice, just like I gave your mother a choice. They could stay quiet and live comfortable lives, or they could keep digging and face the consequences. They were innocent. They were liabilities. He set down the glass and looked at us with eyes that held no remorse. Just like you are now. The threat hung in the air like smoke. I stepped in front of Claire, my hand moving instinctively to my pocket where I'd hidden the recording device. You're not going to hurt anyone else, aren't I? He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. Do you really think I've survived this long by being careless? Do you think I don't have contingency plans? What are you talking about? I know about the evidence. I know about the investigation. I know about the recording device in your pocket. My blood ran cold. I've been watching you, son, both of you. Every move, every plan, every desperate attempt to bring me down. That's impossible, is it? He pulled out his phone, pressed a button. Tell them what you found. A voice crackled through the speaker, someone I didn't recognize. The hotel room has been cleaned, all documents destroyed. The laptop's been wiped, Claire made a strangled sound. And the backup drives? Destroyed. Along with the safe deposit box and the storage unit. Excellent. He hung up and looked at us with satisfaction. 7 years of work, gone in a single morning. Really, Claire, you should have known better than to trust a man who's been playing this game longer than you've been alive. It doesn't matter, Claire said, but I could hear the desperation in her voice. We have copies, insurance policies. Do you? My father tilted his head, studying her like a specimen. Because I have something better. He walked to his desk, pulled out a file, and spread its contents across the leather surface. Photos, documents, financial records, but not the ones Claire had been gathering. Your real name is Sarah Chen. You're originally from Seattle, not San Francisco. You have a brother in witness protection because of gambling debts to the Russian mob. You've been using a false identity for 8 years. Claire Sarah went rigid beside me. You killed a man in self-defense when you were 19. The case was sealed, but money opens a lot of doors, including the ones that lead to very interesting people who would be very interested to know where you are. You bastard. I'm thorough. He gathered up the papers, straightened them with meticulous care. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk away. Both of you. You're going to disappear, and you're never going to contact the authorities about me or my business affairs. And if we don't, then I make a phone call, and within 24 hours, there will be a very expensive contract on your life. And yours, son, just for good measure. The room spun around me. Everything I thought I knew, everything I thought I understood, was crumbling. You're insane. I'm pragmatic. I've built an empire, and I'm not going to let it fall because of 2 emotional children who think they can play in the big leagues. We're not children, no. He looked at me with something almost like pity. Then explain to me how you thought you could outmaneuver someone who's been killing people longer than you've been alive. The words hit like a physical blow. I looked at Claire at Sarah and saw the same realization dawning in her eyes. We weren't the hunters, we were the prey. We had minutes, maybe less. Run, I whispered to Claire as my father turned his back. To pour another drink, the garden, through the hedge maze. There's a gate on the east side. What about you? I'll distract him. No. Her fingers found mine, squeezed tight. We go together or not at all? How touching, my father said without turning around. But I'm afraid neither of you is going anywhere. The door opened, and 2 men entered, not security guards, but something worse. Professional, quiet, the kind of men who cleaned up problems and left no traces. Gentlemen, my father said, please escort my guests to the wine cellar. Make sure they're comfortable. We have some calls to make. Wait, I stepped forward, my mind racing. You want to know about thoroughness? About playing in the big leagues? What are you talking about? Claire Sarah, she's not the only one who's been planning. I pulled out my phone, showed him the screen. I've been recording this entire conversation, and not just recording, live streaming. To every major news outlet, every social media platform, every contact in my address book. His face went white. You want to kill us? Fine, but you'll be doing it in front of about 10,000 witnesses. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Then my father began to laugh, a sound like breaking sanity. "You clever little bastard. You actually think you've won? I think I've got you checkmate, do you?" He nodded to the men who moved closer. "Because I think you're bluffing. And even if you're not, I think you've underestimated me one last time." He was right. I was bluffing. The phone wasn't live streaming, it was barely getting a signal in the thick-walled mansion. But I'd bought us time, and sometimes time was all you needed. "Now," my father continued, "we're going to walk down to the wine cellar like civilized people, and then we're going to have a very long conversation about family loyalty and the cost of betrayal." One of the men grabbed my arm, the other reached for Claire, and that's when she moved. I'd never seen violence like that before, not in movies, not in my darkest nightmares. Claire moved like she'd been trained, like she'd done this before, with a precision that spoke of desperation and years of preparation. The first man went down hard, his head cracking against the marble floor. The second barely had time to reach for his weapon before Claire was on him, something silver flashing in her hand. "Run!" she screamed, but I couldn't move, couldn't think. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone deadly and desperate and completely unknown. My father was shouting into his phone, calling for backup, calling for reinforcements. Blood was spreading across the Persian rug, and somewhere in the distance I heard sirens. "The police," I breathed. "Not the police," Claire said, breathing hard. "My insurance policy." "What?" "FBI. I've been working with them for 3 years. This whole thing, the marriage, the investigation, even you, it was all part of a federal case." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You're federal?" "I'm a lot of things. But right now, I'm the woman who's trying to keep you alive long enough to testify." The sirens were getting closer. My father was still on the phone, his voice rising to a scream. And somewhere in the chaos, I realized that nothing, absolutely nothing, had been what it seemed. "Is your name even Claire? Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She looked at me then, and for just a moment, I saw something real in her eyes, something that might have been regret. "Special Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Financial Crimes Division. I've been undercover for 42 months, investigating a money laundering operation that's been using charitable foundations to funnel money to terrorist organizations. And me? You were never supposed to be part of this. You were supposed to stay away, stay safe, stay out of it." "But I didn't." "No." She touched my face, her fingers coming away bloody. "You didn't. And now everything's fucked." The front door exploded inward. Men in tactical gear poured through, weapons drawn, shouting orders. My father dropped his phone, raised his hands, and for the first time in my life, I saw him look truly afraid. "This is over," I said. "No, Claire, Sarah, whoever," she was said quietly. "This is just the beginning." The trial lasted 6 months. My father was convicted on 18 federal charges, including money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence Sarah had gathered over nearly 4 years was overwhelming, not just financial records, but recorded conversations, photographic evidence, and testimony from a dozen witnesses who'd been too afraid to speak until now. I testified for 3 days. About my mother, about what I'd witnessed, about the confession I'd heard in the library. The defense tried to discredit me, paint me as a bitter son seeking revenge, but the jury saw through it. Sarah testified for a week. She was brilliant, clinical, devastating. She laid out the entire conspiracy with the precision of a surgeon, showing how my father had built his empire on the graves of the women he'd destroyed. When it was over, he was sentenced to life without parole. I should have felt vindicated.
Should have felt like justice had been served.
Instead, I felt hollow. I found Sarah in a hotel bar 2 weeks after the sentencing. She looked different, older, tired, like she'd aged years in the months since we'd met. "You came," she said without looking up from her drink. I had to. Why? Because I need to know what was real. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to know what was real? The sex was real. The danger was real. The way you looked at me like I was something worth saving, that was real too. And the rest? The rest was the job. I sat down across from her, ordered a whiskey. All of it, all of it. She finally looked at me, and I saw something broken in her eyes. I'm good at my job. I'm good at becoming whoever I need to be, making people feel whatever I need them to feel. It's what makes me effective. And now I don't know who I am anymore. We sat in silence for a long time, two people who'd shared something intense and dangerous and ultimately false. Around us, the bar hummed with normal conversation, normal people living normal lives. "I need to tell you something," she said finally. "What?" I wasn't lying about my mother. She really was his second wife. She really did kill herself because of him. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Sarah, and I wasn't lying about falling in love with you. That was never part of the plan." Then why? Because love doesn't change anything. It doesn't make the lies true or the manipulation excusable. It just makes it hurt more. She stood up, threw money on the table. "I'm being transferred. New assignment, new identity, new life. You'll probably never see me again. What if I want to?" "You don't. You want to see Claire, the woman who never existed. Not Sarah, the federal agent who lied to you about everything that mattered." She was walking away when I called after her. "For what it's worth, I loved you too, both of you. All of you." She stopped, her shoulders tensing. Then she turned back, and for just a moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with, vulnerable, real, achingly human. "I know," she said softly. "That's what makes this so fucking tragic. I'm telling you this story because it matters. Because in a world full of lies and manipulation and people who use love as a weapon, the truth is the only thing that has any value. My father is dying in prison. Cancer, they say. Ironic, really. He spent his life poisoning everything he touched. And now he's being poisoned from the inside out." Sarah disappeared. No forwarding address, no social media presence, no way to contact her. She's probably somewhere else now, being someone else, loving someone else who doesn't know her real name. And me? I'm rebuilding. Slowly, carefully learning to trust again, learning to love again. learning that not every beautiful woman with secrets is a federal agent, and not every passion is part of a larger conspiracy. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about her. About the way she looked at me in the garden, about the way she felt in my arms, about the way she said my name like it was something precious. I think about the woman she was beneath all the lies, the one who cried in the shower, who read poetry when she thought no one was watching, who spent 4 years of her life seeking justice for women who couldn't seek it for themselves. And I wonder if, somewhere out there, she thinks about me too. If she remembers what it felt like to be real, even if it was only for a moment. If she knows that even though it was built on lies, what we had was the most honest thing in my life. Love is a dangerous game. But sometimes, if you're very lucky or very foolish, you find someone worth playing it with, even if you lose, even if it destroys you, even if it was never real to begin with. Because in the end, the heart doesn't care about truth or lies or federal investigations or family revenge. The heart just wants what it wants, and sometimes what it wants is the one person who can never, ever be yours. That's my story. That's what happened when I fell in love with my father's wife, and she turned out to be an FBI agent, and we brought down a criminal empire together. It's not the story I thought I'd be telling, but it's the story that happened. And maybe, just maybe, it's the story that needed to be told. The sound of a glass being set down, footsteps walking away, and silence.